Christ is risen, especially in the Polish home on Easter, and especially at table. I'm Father Czesław Krysa, rector of St. Casimir Church in Buffalo, New York, the Kaisertown section. And as you've been following From Table to Altar and back in its various video clips and series, today we're gathering at what is the center heart of the Polish tradition of Easter, the blessing of Easter baskets and the sharing later of the food. Now today we're doing my father's tradition, and he is Polish Easter Max, and as a matter of fact, XXXXXL Polish tradition. He loved it, and he passed on that love to me. I'm so happy to be able to share that with you today. So my father's Easter basket first begins with a pure white cloth. The cloth needs to be white. Now you will say, oh, this is a little dark. Well, this is pure linen. So this is a linen cloth. Now I'll show you why in a second here. Because every Polish solemnity at home had a white tablecloth. It might have been embroidered like this one, but no color. White tablecloth is symbolic of a major feast, not just even, something like a birthday party. And Easter was one of the most greatest feasts, if not the greatest. And it was blessed with food. So the Easter basket must have a white cloth as your initial layer in which you lay, or traditionally was laid, on the bottom of the basket. You'll see why later. It's so important to have the edges here extending a little bit longer than you would think. Then, I wish I still had the platter. This is not it, the original platter. The daddy would lay the platter in the middle, and he had that platter selected in such a way that, like over here, and it might happen here as well for us, the platter kind of, let's see if we can get that happen here, clipped into the basket. And that platter was saved only for Easter Sunday. And the basket, and the two things were like two sides of a coin. And into the platter, he would place the food, laying it on the dish, which is on top of the white cloth, or the linen, unbleached linen cloth, which is a sign, almost an extension of the tablecloth. The first item that went into the basket was the cross bread. The cross bread, which was in this case purchased at the local bakeries, was a symbol, because it was round and it was signed with the cross, of Jesus Christ's communion and home. Not confused at all with communion in church, but an extension of what we just did that morning on Easter Sunday when we received communion and came home to share family communion. Now what's the next step? Well, the next step started the Saturday before Palm Sunday. We made our own sausage, we smoked our own sausage. And that's what Polish guys do. They smoke their sausage, okay? Maybe other things, but sausage for sure. And the homemade smoked sausage formed a ring, almost like a crown, around the bread itself. And it was a symbol, and we still experience it, as a symbol of family unity, the rings of sausage. And in our house, it's gotta be smoked. Nothing else went in other than smoked sausage, or no other sausage was used. The next were various forms of meat, always a slab of bacon. Bacon in slabs, not slices, was placed as a sign of bounty, pork being bounty, the bountiful life, that all the food that you gave up basically during Lent, or at least the Fridays of Lent, or its bounty and succulent nature, was all shared on Easter Sunday. And with that, a piece of the ham. My daddy'd always cut a piece of the family ham and place it next to it. So here you have the meat, the symbol of the sacrifice of Jesus, because his flesh was given for the life of the world, and still is in communion, but hung on the cross. He bled, just like the slaughter of the animal is a sign of giving life. No life is life-giving unless it is given. And so this is given to give us life. And first, because it's the first major feast after 7 weeks of Lent, first blessed in church. So here is our basic basket, right here. What's next, and what's almost as important, are how you season the foods that you eat. You're all familiar with horseradish, of which a horseradish root, a separate root, was also placed in the basket. And that horseradish was prepared in a special way for the sharing of eggs, which began the breakfast. So the horseradish root I'll save for a little bit later, but we had not one, but 3 kinds, and sometimes 4 types of horseradish. Now this is not going to fit exactly as it did in our family baskets, as these are quite large, these bottles here. But they came and were put almost like at the 4 corners. This here being the white horseradish, which is pure horseradish and vinegar. This being the white horseradish mixed with egg yolks, a particular tradition of our family, mixed with boiled egg yolks. And then, of course, in sign of the blood of Jesus, the red beet flavored or beet mixed horseradish. And everybody knew how good the meal was if the horseradish burned a little bit, because it's a reminder for us of the bitterness of Jesus' suffering. And I always tell the kids when they come for their blessing, you can't have any sweets, any chocolates, any candy until you first taste some horseradish. You got to taste the bitterness of Jesus' suffering in order to be able to enjoy the sweetness of his resurrection. Bitter and sweet, that's part of life. A good part of it. Then we placed into the basket, or Daddy would, some vinegar. We always liked apple cider vinegar, which was used to flavor the white borscht, or white broth soup. Not red in our house, but white. And apple cider vinegar gave it a nice sweet and tart flavor to itself. And this particular vial that you see here, carafe, was just used once a year for that blessing. Inside was placed pepper and salt. Salt and bread are a sign of Polish hospitality. That's how we greet the guest. We greet the guest with that which nourishes and sustains. We greet the guest with salt, which preserves everything that is good because it doesn't spoil. And boy, we need some preservation from spoilage in our life. And so salt, and this is my grandmother's original salt shaker. It's even banged up a little bit over here, but she would place this in her basket. Let's put it here. Sometimes other fancy salt and pepper shakers were, and Daddy also would put pepper because pepper was used. As a matter of fact, a lot of these guests were Polish veterans, and boy, you gotta have some good pieprz. You really have to have something. That was our version of hot sauce, if you want to call it that, pepper mixed with the soup. Now, I'm going to now show you a little bit of something because, I have the privilege every year to bless baskets a number of times, bless food. So I don't just bless food, I do an inspection, okay? And inspecting the food, here's some other traditions that I picked up. Some people would not put salt in a salt shaker, but they'd place it in a shot glass. It was a reminder of the ancient salt cellars that were in every home. And where do you get a pinch of salt from? That's the pinch of salt. You never shook the salt, you just took a pinch of it and placed it in a particular recipe or dish. And then others who were a little bit more ingenious took and mixed the salt and the pepper together in one shot glass. So you had basically a salt and pepper cellar that you use. And the word cellar here is used for the place where the salt is kept and then taken like a pinch, as I showed, when needed. And the salt cellar would always be really close, sometimes even hanging on the wall next to the stove. Salt, we are to be the salt of the earth, that which preserves what is good, preserves the goodness, preserves what is good. For our purposes, we will remove the pepper, okay? Just to make some room here. And all these things will lean against each other, as you see in a few seconds. The European sweetness before the advent of sugar in the quantities which we use it today, almost overdoing it sometimes, and we have to watch, was the apple. So the apple was saved as an element of sweetness. And sweetness has to be a part of the basket. So some people, and this is not my father's tradition, but some people, as I witness up until this day, place an apple, and coming to the exotic United States, which has a Florida in it, an orange replaces the apple. And so the orange becomes a symbol of both bounty and sweetness of this feast, because we taste and see how good the Lord is, how sweet it is to be connected with Jesus. Okay, my mother prepared the butter in a very simple way. The butter in a dish with peppercorns or cloves in the form of a cross. And that was also placed in the basket, because butter is another source of sweetness. We don't think of that because we put it this way. When someone in the family bakes something and everybody's tasting it, the first thing they would say, if it's good, they would say, dobre, bo nie słodkie. Well, good because it's not overly sugared. It's sweet, but it's not overly sugared. Which when we sometimes almost tend to put sugar on top of sugar. Okay? Now, the other aspect, which was always placed in Daddy's basket, was a bottle of wine, usually homemade. And one of the aspects of our family basket was everything was homemade. I didn't mention the horseradish here, but my uncles used to always laugh at my mother crying on Good Friday over horseradish. But she would say, but you're not going to cry when you're going to be tasting it, are you? No. But I have to do that here. Wine is a reminder, just like of the bread, of the Eucharistic sacrifice, and also of the sweetness of heaven. God has given us wine to bring joy to our heart. That's what it says in the Bible, in the Psalms. At this particular point, we can put the horseradish root, as I mentioned earlier, because there always had to be a horseradish root in the basket because of the way my father prepared the eggs for the sharing, which we'll see in another From Table to Altar and Back clip as time is passing. Now, the eggs, the colored eggs. Here is actually one of my mother's original onion skin colored eggs. And that's the way Mama colored them. Daddy kind of got a little bit Americanized, so he liked all the different pastel colors. So wherever there's room around, you have to have eggs, because the eggs is the way you begin the Easter breakfast. Eggs must be there because you begin with the sharing of the eggs. And so eggs were placed in whatever part of the basket. As you can see, there was room. And all the solid colored eggs were meant to be eaten at the Easter breakfast, actually to initiate the breakfast. Now, my father's twist on this, and he had a twist of his own on everything, was a regular white raw egg. Because as soon as I came home, or we came home for church, that right after it was blessed, he said, "Daj mi to jajko, give me that egg." And he took it, poked a hole in it, and then drank it. And he said, that's so I'd be healthy during the year. So he drank his first blessed egg. So we had to have one of those in the basket as a part of the blessing. And then a tradition which I really revere and have over the years amassed not only a collection of some 3,000 from various regions in Poland, but come to understand the depth of this tradition and revere its symbolism of the outbreak of spring joy and life, are the Polish pisanki. I'm going to put into this particular basket as the first egg our family design. which I was able to meet my great aunt, who was the professional, both on the street and in our family, of writing pisanki, and place that in an honored place next to the bread here, and by the wine and horseradish. And then, literally, as many as you can fit. Every place is an empty space, okay? All different kinds, and these are from various regions in Poland, of various colors, and all kinds of spring depictions of rebirth and life, many of them like coming out of the darkness. And you see on this black egg the beautiful contrast of color and life on these eggs here. And the priest used to always stop by our basket and said, one year he actually picked it up. He was from Poland. He picked up one of our eggs and said, with his heavy accent, "This is real basket. This is a real Polish egg." And everybody from the parish came around and visited that exhibit in the pew that he opened up during the blessed basket blessing. There were actually a couple other families who did that same tradition. So we'll put a few more here because we got a couple other things that got to go in here yet. And you got to put them in there so they're kind of like visible, featured, not hidden under anything. As a matter of fact, as you see, they're kind of hiding other things. But we got to see a little bit of everything here. All right, that's enough for now of the pisanka, or the written egg, on which the egg writer captures the first thunderbolt, lights a candle, and writes images of renewal, resurrection, and rebirth on a simple egg. All right, what else do we have here? Oh, now we don't have room for this because this is a thick bottle, and the horseradish one, but you had to have a bottle of beer, and this is Leżajsk beer, the town my father came from. Leżajsk beer. But why did you have to have a bottle of beer? Because you didn't drink beer for 40 days. And this is your first taste of beer. And therefore, the ancient blessings, way back until the 15th and 14th centuries, have a blessing for beer. Nothing terribly unusual in the Polish mind and imagination. Okay? Now, another example of Americanization you had to have sweets. For Poles and for early immigrants, the sweet was basically the yeast dough bread, or babka, or placek as it was called. That was where sweetness, raisins and sugar and lemon rind and vanilla and flavors of all kinds. That's where the sweetness was experienced. In the bread breaking. Well, in the United States, we got too much candy. Okay, we have rows of a lane of candy in every grocery store, just candy. But in our house, we had to have, oh yeah, they had to have some chocolate eggs. Bo to tak robią Amerykanie. That's the way the Americans do it. And God help us if we didn't have any jelly beans. All right, and those brought color, life, resilience, everything you gotta have. Well, not in the butter, but in the basket, okay? And you see how they just look so happy just by sitting there. Oh, those are hiding underneath. All right. So jelly beans and chocolates. And the vernal rodent is not allowed in this basket, okay? Because we don't bless vernal rodents unless it's the feast of St. Francis, all right, okay? What else do we have here? My mother's connection here, and that would be some flowers. Some spring flowers and pussy willows here that are a sign of the fact in Polish, we sing on Easter Sunday that Jesus rose from the dead like a wondrous lily blooming. I don't ever heard that anyplace else except in our Polish Easter Sunday tradition. Because there has to be flowers. It's almost different kind of flower for every Polish festival, every Polish holy day, and every Polish season. And the pussy willow is the king of the Easter flower because it's the first one to announce that resurrection is coming. Now, a motherly touch. My mother was quite inventive. Yes, very simple. And so she would collect orange pits, seeds, and dry them. After you eat an orange, she'd collect them all, dry them up, and then stick them in all the pots. She had plants, violets or various type of plants. One of the things Polish women are known for is houseplants. Okay? And she would stick them in there just in time so the sprigs would come out just in time for Easter. So she would take those sprigs and place them in the Easter basket. And that's how, weeks before Easter, she prepared for the resurrection so that her Easter basket may proclaim new life. And greenness is the symbol of life coming to birth, just like the eggs in the various colors of new life. And so these sprigs were the garnishes that not only appeared in the basket, but as you see here on the babka that we have here, also placed and as a garnish on various foods. This is a really neat and unique touch that Mama added to Daddy's tradition. Let's get a couple more here. Because it looks like the whole basket is alive. Not just taking a couple of, eggs and a sausage. And you know how I told you how my father had to be the Max on everything. So, even though his name was Stasio, not Max. And here we have the depiction of, if you want to call it, the Krysa family basket with a couple additions on it. Not the whole lot, but a couple. Now, this kind of basket, when you carry it to church, you can't carry it like this. You got to carry it from the bottom. Nobody carried our basket like this one because you were afraid that something might shift in transit. Okay? Now, I showed you at the beginning, we put the tablecloth runner, if you want to call it, underneath. Then you take the ends were taken and folded over. And remember, this is the white, symbol of the resurrection, symbol of the white robe of Jesus' glory, symbol for us of purity and innocence. Over this particular lining, if you want to call it, then would go the Easter basket cover. And we have a very traditional one here. This is not originally from our family, but was recently depicted at a parish here in the United States and presents some of the features of the Easter basket. And not just the family Easter basket in Polish tradition, but the sharing of it at home, with the lamb being the center, the lamb interpreting everything that's in the contents of the basket as life-giving, because life can only be given if life is taken away. This is the mystery of how we in our families celebrate Jesus, who sits down at our table symbolically as the Lamb of God. And we have him here in sugar. Didn't put that in the basket, as we never really had one until much later. They started being imported from Poland, or some specialty delis would have them. But I always heard about them. But our lamb here is on the basket cover. The white glory of the resurrection, which is the color, which is mentioned in Jesus' resurrection from the tomb. And the contents of an extremely bountiful basket, an extremely extravagant succulent feast, which ends austere fasting and very intense prayer. Sometimes that prayer was called bitter laments. On Easter Sunday, just a little bit of bitterness in the horseradish, and the rest is the sweetness which we taste of eternity. So, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, a little bit of opening up of the tradition of the Polish Easter basket, at least as it was centered in my family. Know that every family has its own tradition. This is what I received, and received from other families that brought their baskets, as I showed you, some other twists on various traditions. Essential here is bread, the cross bread. Essential here are the eggs, because the blessed hard-boiled eggs begins the breakfast. Essential is some form of smoked meat, usually, but at least pork, as a sign of that bounty, that almost extravagance, especially if you celebrated Lent. And you can't have Easter without Lent. You can't have the resurrection without Good Friday. So, Christ is risen in the Polish home.